All right, so we're diving into Creatures and Chronicles today. This is a really cool RPG that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in. Especially if you're, new to this whole world of tabletop RPGs, this is a great one to start with. And to help me break it all down, I've got, an expert here with me.
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time with Creatures and Chronicles lately, and I gotta say, I'm impressed. One of the things that really drew me to it was the story behind it. Did you know that this game was created by just one guy, Peter Monkholm?
Okay.
And he was doing this not just for the love of RPGs, but also to support his family. His son has ADHD and Asperger's.
Oh, wow.
And so he needed to be able to work from home and provide the care that his son needed.
So this game is not just a game. It's also like a labor of love, a way to support his family.
It's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. And so I think it's important for people to understand that they're playing this game, that it's not just some faceless corporation that made this.
No.
There's a real person behind it with a real story.
Yeah, and you can feel that in every aspect of the game.
Yeah, you can tell that it was made with a lot of care and passion.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I always love hearing about those kinds of passion projects that turn into something amazing.
It's a pretty incredible story. But, enough about the backstory. Let's actually talk about the game itself. So Creatures and Chronicles, it's an early access game right now, meaning it's still being developed, which is exciting because it means it's constantly evolving.
Okay, so early access, got it. But what kind of game are we talking about here? What are the core mechanics?
It's a browser-based, turn-based fantasy RPG, and it's heavily inspired by classic games like Dungeons & Dragons. Specifically, it's built on the OS RIC system, which a lot of people might not be familiar with.
Yeah, OS RIC, I'm not super familiar with that.
It basically focuses on that old-school, classic tabletop RPG feel, emphasizes things like player skill and strategy over just mindless button mashing.
I like that. So it's got that classic feel, but what makes it unique?
Well, for one thing, it's designed for co-op play. You can play with your friends and family all on the same screen. It's a really fun and social way to experience an RPG.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So they've got that social aspect, but what about the visual side of things?
That's where things get really interesting. The game has this amazing 3D virtual tabletop. It's like having all the elements of a physical tabletop, the miniatures, the maps, the dice, but brought to life in this beautiful digital space.
That sounds awesome. So we've got the classic mechanics, the social aspect, and these impressive visuals. Now let's talk about the heart of any RPG, the characters.
Right. Character creation in Creatures and Chronicles is really robust. There are tons of options to choose from, which is awesome. You got 6 different races: humans, dwarves, halflings, elves, half-elves, and gnomes. And each race has its own unique set of abilities and, quirks,
I'm always a sucker for a good halfling.
Me too. They're sneaky and agile. But it's not just about the aesthetics. The race you choose actually impacts gameplay. It determines what classes you can play, what skills you're good at, that kind of thing.
Oh, so it's a strategic choice, not just a cosmetic one.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you pick your race, but then what about classes? What roles can you play?
Okay, so you've got your 4 main class categories: warrior, wizard, priest, and rogue. And then within each category, there are subclasses. So under warrior, you could choose to be a fighter, a paladin, or a ranger.
Nice. So there's a good amount of variety there. But one thing that always trips me up in RPGs is coming up with a good backstory for my character. Where do I even start?
That's actually one of the things I love about Creatures and Chronicles. It uses AI to generate unique and detailed backstories for each character you create.
Wait, really? That's so cool. So I don't have to spend hours agonizing over my character's tragic past?
Nope. The AI does all the heavy lifting for you. It's pretty impressive, honestly. And it's not just backstories. The AI actually plays a big role in the whole role-playing aspect of the game.
Okay, now you've got to explain this. How does AI enhance role-playing?
So there's this really innovative feature called character impersonation. Basically, you can actually type or even talk to your AI-powered party members as if they were real people.
Wow, so it's like having an actual conversation with your companions, not just reading lines of text.
Exactly. Each character has their own personality and perspective, and the AI does a great job of bringing them to life.
That's amazing. It really adds another layer of depth to the whole RPG experience.
And to make it even more immersive, Creatures and Chronicles uses Google Cloud text-to-speech. So those AI responses aren't just lines of text. You actually hear them spoken aloud in these really realistic voices. It's like having a genuine conversation with your party members.
That's so cool. It's like the AI is acting as a co-DM, bringing the whole world to life.
It really is. It's honestly one of the most innovative features I've seen in an RPG.
All right, so we've talked about character creation, AI, and all the cool features. But what about the actual gameplay experience? What's it like to actually play Creatures and Chronicles?
So remember that 3D virtual tabletop we talked about earlier? That's where all the action takes place. Combat is turn-based, so it's all about strategy, planning your moves, and making the most of your actions.
I love a good tactical challenge. So walk me through the combat. What are the key elements?
Well, first, you roll for initiative to determine the turn order. Then each character has a variety of actions they can take, like moving, attacking, casting spells, using special abilities, or even waiting for a better opportunity.
So it's not just about attacking blindly. You have to think strategically.
Exactly. And one of the things that makes Creatures and Chronicles combat so engaging is the fog of war. Basically, you can only see what your characters can see.
So you're not just looking at a fully revealed map. There's an element of exploration and discovery.
Yep. You never know what's lurking around the corner, which adds a real sense of tension and excitement to the game.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So fog of war, tactical combat, what else? What other nuances should players be aware of?
Positioning is really important. You need to think about line of sight, cover, and flanking maneuvers. And the game also features a wide variety of weapons and armor, each with its own stats and damage types.
So there's a lot of depth to the combat system. You have to be smart about your choices, consider your enemy's weaknesses, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. It's a game that rewards careful planning and strategic thinking. And it's this combination of strategic combat, immersive storytelling, and innovative features that really sets Creatures and Chronicles apart from other RPGs out there.
Now, you mentioned that Creatures and Chronicles is still in early access. Does that mean there are things that could be improved or expanded upon?
Oh, for sure. Like any early access game, there are definitely areas where it could be polished and refined. But the core mechanics are solid, and the foundation is incredibly strong.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm definitely intrigued. But before we dive too deep into the future of the game, I'm curious to get your overall impressions. What do you think of Creatures and Chronicles so far?
I am really impressed. It's clear that a lot of thought, care, and innovation have gone into its development, and it shows in every aspect of the game. The 3D virtual tabletop is a game changer, the AI integration is mind-blowing, and the overall experience is incredibly engaging.
Sounds like you're a fan.
You know, that's what struck me throughout this whole deep dive. It's not just a game, it's a project with heart and a real desire to make something special.
Exactly. You can feel that passion in every part of the game.
So the big question, the rating, 1 to 10. What's our verdict?
This is always the hardest part, especially with early access games, because they're always changing. But based on what we've seen, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10.
I think I'm with you there. It's a game with a lot of heart, a lot of potential, and it definitely stands out.
It's not perfect, but the core experience is fantastic. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Who knows? With all the updates and community involvement, that 7.5 could easily become an 8 or even a 9.
Right. That's what's so cool about early access. You're not just playing a finished game, you're part of the journey. You get to see it evolve.
So if you're interested, I'd say give it a try.
Especially if you're into tabletop RPGs and you're looking for that depth and customization.
You might run into some issues, but you'll also find a game that's full of innovation and heart.
And you might just fall in love with the world. All right, so Creatures and Chronicles is getting a glowing recommendation from our expert. And I have to say, I'm starting to get pretty excited about it myself. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift our focus to one of the core elements of any RPG combat. We've talked about the strategic aspects, the fog of war, and the importance of planning, but I'm curious to hear more about the specifics. What makes combat in Creatures and Chronicles so unique and engaging?
One of the things that really stands out to me is how the game manages to capture the tension and unpredictability of a real tabletop encounter. It's not just about crunching numbers and rolling dice. It's about making tough decisions in the heat of the moment, adapting to unexpected situations, and sometimes just getting a little bit lucky.
You mentioned the fog of war earlier, where you can only see what your characters can see. How does that impact the combat experience, and what are some of the strategies players can use to overcome that challenge?
Well, imagine you're cautiously making your way through a dark and winding dungeon. You know there are enemies lurking somewhere in the shadows, but you can't see them until they're right on top of you. This creates a constant sense of anticipation and forces players to think carefully about their every move. You can't just charge in blindly. You have to use your wits and the environment to your advantage.
So it's not just about brute force, it's about using your brain as much as your brawn.
Exactly. You have to consider things like line of sight, flanking maneuvers, and using cover to protect yourself from enemy attacks. The game also features a dynamic lighting system, which adds another layer of complexity. For example, if you're carrying a torch, you'll be able to see a limited area around you, but anything beyond that will be shrouded in darkness.
So there's a trade-off between visibility and vulnerability. It sounds like Creatures and Chronicles encourages players to be tactical and think outside the box. But what about the actions themselves? What kind of choices do players have during combat?
You have the basic actions you'd expect from a turn-based RPG movement, attack, spellcasting, using special abilities. But what I love about Creatures and Chronicles is that it goes beyond the basics. It gives you a lot of options and allows for a lot of customization. For example, instead of just having a generic attack action, you might have multiple attack options depending on your weapon and your character's skills. You might have a thrust attack that deals piercing damage, a slashing attack that can hit multiple targets, or a powerful overhead strike that sacrifices speed for increased damage.
So there's a lot of depth to the combat system. It's not just about clicking the same attack button over and over again. You have to think about the best way to use your abilities and exploit your enemy's weaknesses.
Absolutely. And that same level of depth applies to spellcasting, using special abilities, everything. Creatures and Chronicles gives you a lot of tools to work with, and it's up to you to figure out the best way to use them.
It sounds like combat in Creatures and Chronicles is a really well-designed blend of strategy, tactical thinking, and, well, a bit of luck. It's not just about mindless fighting. It's about using your head and making smart decisions.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so engaging. You're constantly challenged to think ahead, adapt to new situations, and outsmart your opponents. And when you pull off a clever maneuver or a risky strategy that pays off, it's incredibly satisfying.
Now, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I want to touch on one more aspect of Creatures and Chronicles that I think is particularly noteworthy: the community. What's your sense of the community that's forming around this game? What role do you see it playing in the future of Creatures and Chronicles?
From what I've seen so far, the community is incredibly passionate and engaged. There's a real sense of excitement and camaraderie among the players. It's one of those communities where people are genuinely excited to share their experiences, help each other out, and just generally geek out over the game.
It's always heartening to see a game foster that kind of positive and supportive community. It can really make a difference in the long-term success of a game.
Absolutely. And I think the community is going to play a crucial role in shaping the future of Creatures and Chronicles, especially with the introduction of the Adventure Module store. The ability for players to create and share their own content is going to open up a world of possibilities.
It's like giving the players the keys to the kingdom, empowering them to become co-creators of the game world. And that's a really exciting prospect. But we'll have to save that discussion for the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
And it's not just like, creating stories. It's like you can build entire worlds. It's amazing.
So you're not just playing the game, you're actually shaping the game world too. That's pretty wild.
It really is. And the best part, creators can actually earn money from their modules if they get popular.
Oh, wow. So it's like a whole new economy within the game.
Exactly. It encourages people to make high-quality content, which is good for everyone.
I love that idea. Yeah. But, we've got to be realistic. Creatures and Chronicles is still in early access, right? So there must be some areas that could be improved or maybe things that need a bit more work.
Yeah, for sure. Like the 3D virtual tabletop is great. It looks amazing, but sometimes it can be a little bit clunky to use, like moving the camera around or interacting with stuff.
Yeah, I get that. Early access games, there are always going to be a few kinks to work out.
Exactly. And I think it would be cool if there were more pre-made adventures available right from the start. Like, the ones they have are good, but having more options would be great.
More variety is always a good thing. But what about the core mechanics of the game? Are there any aspects of the gameplay that you think could be tweaked or improved?
I think the character progression could be a little more in-depth. Right now, leveling up feels a bit too simple. It would be cool to have more choices, like branching skill trees or something like that to make leveling up feel more impactful.
Yeah, more customization options as you level up would be really cool. But overall, it sounds like you're pretty happy with the direction the game is heading.
Definitely. I mean, Creatures and Chronicles has the potential to be something truly special. It's this unique blend of classic RPG elements with cutting-edge technology. And the developer, Peter, he's clearly passionate about it. You can really feel that.
Speaking of Peter, we've talked a lot about the features and mechanics of the game, but let's take a moment to acknowledge the man behind it all. His story is pretty inspiring.
Absolutely. To create a game of this scope with all the AI stuff and the 3D visuals and do it all by himself, I mean, that's incredible.
It really is. And to know that he did it all as a way to connect with his son, that just adds this whole other layer to it.
It's a testament to the power of, passion and creativity.
Absolutely. So shifting gears a bit, I want to talk about the story in Creatures and Chronicles. We've touched on the AI-generated backstories, but what about the overall narrative? What kinds of stories can players expect to experience in this world?
Well, it's not like a typical RPG where you're following this one set storyline. It's more like they give you this rich world full of lore and interesting characters, and then you kind of get to create your own adventures.
So it's more about player freedom and creating your own stories.
Exactly. The pre-made adventures are there to give you a starting point, but it's really up to you and your imagination to decide where you want to go and what you want to do.
That's cool. It sounds like it strikes a nice balance between having structure and giving players the freedom to be creative.
Yeah.
And speaking of creativity, let's circle back to the Adventure Module store. We've talked about its potential, but I'm curious to dive a little deeper. What are some of the specific tools that creators will have access to? What can they actually build?
Well, from what I've seen, it's going to be pretty comprehensive. Like, creators can design their own maps, with different terrains, buildings, all that. They can create their own creatures with unique stats and abilities. They can even script events, like write dialogue and set traps. It's pretty amazing.
So they're not just creating levels, they're basically designing their own little RPG worlds within the game.
Pretty much, yeah. And they can do all of this using the in-game tools, so you don't have to be some kind of coding genius to make something awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It really opens up the possibilities for anyone who wants to try their hand at game design. But let's not forget about the players who are new to Creatures and Chronicles. Will there be resources available to help them learn the ropes?
Oh, absolutely. The developer has been really focused on making the game accessible to everyone. There will be a tutorial to guide you through the basics, and there's going to be a really detailed in-game encyclopedia that explains all the lore and mechanics. And of course, there's the community itself. People are already super helpful and welcoming to new players.
That's great to hear. It's always reassuring to know that there's support available when you're starting out with a new game.
Yeah.
Especially a game like this that has so much depth and complexity. But speaking of complexity, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. The business model. Creatures and Chronicles is going with a subscription-based model, which I know has been a bit controversial. Some people love it, some people hate it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the subscription model can be a bit tricky. I get why some people are hesitant, especially for an early access game, but I think it makes sense for Creatures and Chronicles. Like, it's not just about paying for access, it's about supporting the development and being part of the community.
So it's more like an investment in the future of the game.
Exactly, and it gives the developer the resources to keep adding new features and content. Plus, subscribers get access to everything, including the AI stuff, the adventure modules, all of it.
It sounds like it could be a really good model for a game like this, especially with all the ambitious plans the developer has.
I think so too. It's a way to build a sustainable community around the game. And I'd say to anyone who's on the fence about subscribing, just take a look at what the developer has already accomplished. He's clearly committed to making this game something special.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to talk about something that's always a challenge for RPG developers: finding the right balance between accessibility and complexity. How does Creatures and Chronicles approach that?
Well, their philosophy seems to be easy to learn, difficult to master. Like, the basic mechanics are pretty straightforward, so anyone can pick it up and start playing. But there's also a lot of depth there, for people who want to really master the game.
So it caters to both casual players and hardcore RPG enthusiasts.
Yeah, exactly. And they have difficulty settings too, so you can adjust the challenge to your liking. Plus, you can even tweak the AI to make combat easier or harder.
It's all about giving players options and letting them customize their experience. And that's something I really appreciate about Creatures and Chronicles.
Me too. It's a game that respects its players and trusts them to figure things out at their own pace.
And on that note, we'll have to wrap up this part of our deep dive, but don't worry, there's more to come. In the final part, we'll be exploring the future of Creatures and Chronicles, the developer's roadmap, and what this game could mean for the world of RPGs. So stay tuned. All right, so we're back, and we've talked a lot about Creatures and Chronicles, the gameplay, the AI, that awesome adventure module store, but now I kind of want to look ahead. What's the future look like for this game?
Well, one thing that's really encouraging is that the developer is all about transparency and community. Like Peter Munkholm, he's constantly sharing updates about the game, asking for feedback, really involving the players in the whole process. It's refreshing, you know?
That's so important, especially for an early access game. It builds trust, makes you feel like you're part of something.
Exactly. And that community involvement, I think it's going to be huge for the future of Creatures and Chronicles. Especially with the adventure module store, that could be a real game changer. Not just for this game, but like for RPGs in general.
Think about it. Players creating and sharing their own adventures. It's like a never-ending library of content, all driven by the community.
It's like breaking down the walls between being a player and a game designer. Anyone can create something amazing and share it with the world.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. And it's not just about quantity, right? It's about quality, too. Because creators can actually earn money from their modules. There's a real incentive to make them good, to make them stand out.
Totally. It creates this whole ecosystem for RPG content, all fueled by passion and creativity. It's really exciting to see. And it's not just the adventure module store. Peter's got other cool stuff planned, too, like more options for customizing your characters, new races and classes.
Creatures and Chronicles is pushing the boundaries of what RPGs can be.
Yeah, it's like a glimpse into the future of gaming. And it's a future I'm definitely excited about.
We've spent this whole deep dive talking about the nuts and bolts of Creatures and Chronicles, the mechanics, the technology, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really about something much simpler, the power of storytelling.
That's what RPGs are all about, right? Creating stories together, having those shared experiences that you remember for years to come.
Creatures and Chronicles gives you the tools to do that. To build worlds, to craft your own adventures, to really let your imagination run wild.
And who knows, maybe some of the people listening to this will become the next great adventure module creators. Maybe they'll be the ones shaping the future of Creatures and Chronicles and inspiring a whole new generation of RPG fans.
That's a great thought. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into Creatures and Chronicles. I hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have.
Me too. It's been a blast.
And for anyone out there who's looking for a fresh, innovative, and just plain fun RPG experience, I highly recommend checking out Creatures and Chronicles.
You won't regret it.
Until next time, happy gaming, everyone.
Brave adventurers, it seems our time together in this video has come to an end, but fear not, for the quest continues beyond the borders of this digital scroll. If you've found your heart pounding with excitement, your mind swirling with possibilities, then I beseech you, hit that like button as if it were a critical hit and share this video with fellow seekers of lore and treasure. Don't forget to ring the enchanted bell of notifications and subscribe to our channel, for in doing so you'll be the first to know when new quests, characters and mystical artifacts are unveiled. And your wisdom is valuable. Leave your thoughts, questions and tales of your own epic adventures in the comments below. Your words may just inspire the next grand quest. To join our ever-growing fellowship and to embark on your own adventures beyond your wildest imagination, visit our sanctuary in the digital realm, creatures-chronicles.com. There you'll find all you need to become the hero you were destined to be. Until we meet again, may your dice rolls be ever in your favor, and may your adventures be as epic as the quests that lie ahead. Farewell, adventurer.